Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Kristine and today I'm gonna go through bookbinding Manacled with you guys. So after printing hundreds of pages, we start folding the signatures. This one in particular was 10 pages per signature. So we just go through the entire book, and I can't really remember how long this takes, but this is probably one of my favorite steps because it's just so satisfying to fold everything for some reason. Most of the clips in this video I'm gonna speed it up for you guys because it does take a bit of time for each step. So once we've got all our signatures, the next step is to put them in a book press. Mine is just a handmade book press that I think I saw a video on how to make it on YouTube, and it was fairly simple to make. So I would actually leave these for 24 hours. So this is the signatures the next day, and it's made such a big difference, and they are much flatter than they were before. So Manacled is actually 3 volumes, and I decided to bind it into one book, which I will later regret because it is so thick and it's very complicated as a first bind, but that's okay. Lesson learned. We will get better at it, and I will add in the description the typeset that I used for this copy. And I thought I would just share with you guys that I'm making this for me. I am not reselling this. I have no plans to resell this copy. I just really enjoy bookbinding in general, and I thought it would be fun to actually start binding fan fiction. So the next step is to puncture each signature, and I'm sorry if I'm not using the correct terms. I'm a self-taught bookbinder. So basically the particular type of stitching I'm planning on doing is called the French link stitch, and to be honest, I actually messed it up with this first one because I've never practiced it before, but that's okay. We will get better. So this is what the signatures will look like, and the next step is to measure the length of the string we're going to use. So from what I've learned, you measure to the length of how many signatures you have in total, and I'm pretty sure I added a little bit extra as well just to be sure. And now I'm just rubbing the string along this wax just to stop it from fraying as I'm pulling it through each hole. So it was very fiddly to start with, so I didn't record the first bit of me stitching this book, and you can kind of see I'm still struggling because sometimes not every hole is thick enough for my needle to go through. So this step probably was the most tedious, and once you get the hang of it, it is very relaxing. But the first few signatures, my string actually kept getting tangled because it was so long to begin with. Finally, with lots of patience, I finished sewing the signatures together, and let's not look too closely because this is very wrong. But oh, and I also run out of string near the end there with my last signature, but it still is holding together, so I can't really complain. I'm not really sure about the tension, if it's meant to be a lot tighter, but we will get better with the next one. So next we're gonna start cutting our covers. So you need, I think this is called framing ruler, but it protects your fingers while cutting. A very sharp Stanley knife, or box cutter, some of you might call it, and our text block so we can measure the thickness of the boards that we need. So next, let's measure the book so we can cut our boards. So just measure the width and the length of your book, and I actually added, I think, an extra 6 mil for the width. It all just depends on how thick your boards are. And now we get to cutting our boards. Just be very careful with this process and just make sure you have a very sharp blade, because you will be slicing this box board multiple times. And I don't know if you can tell, but my fingers are kind of protected with that ruler. And then back to the book press. This is just gonna hold it in place so I can actually glue the spine. So I ended up applying, I think, 2 coats of glue, and just make sure you wait between each coat so that the first coat will dry before you add your next coat. So this is about an hour later, and this is our second coat. Try not to put too much glue as you're applying it, just in case it's too much all at once and it ends up actually leaking over the sides. It's better to have less and then just add a little bit more as you go. So next we will add our spine lining, and for this I'm using bookbinding mall, MULL. You can get this from any art shop that sells bookbinding supplies. And because it's such a thick book, this is just an extra layer of support, as well as you can see the bands that I've added underneath the bookbinding mall. Next step, we're just gonna glue our end papers, and I think this one I've used some washi paper that I got from Japan last time I was there. It's got some really nice flecks of gold through the paper, which is my favorite, and I really like the texture as well. So next I'm just adding the end bands. As you can see, I've already added the ribbon as well, which will be the bookmark. And now it's time to apply the book cloth, and be very generous with your glue for this step. Not too much, of course, because then you can get a lot of air bubbles, but a very generous amount at least. And make sure you get it right to the edges of the boards. And I just have a little tool there so I can make sure that it's all aligned as well. First, just trim any excess book cloth that you don't want. So next we're just gonna cut our corners, and technically you don't really need this little tool that I have, but it's nice to have. But just make sure you have a little bit extra on the edge. Don't cut it like flush to the board. When you fold it, you're gonna need that extra bit of cloth so that you don't see the board. And unfortunately I did get air bubbles in this cover, but that's okay, it's just for us anyway. So now we will glue the sides. And now we're gonna start casing the text block, and this is probably the most nerve-wracking step for me anyway, because sometimes it will actually make the covers stiff if you've glued it in the wrong place. But like I said, I'm not a pro, so please just search other videos on YouTube for better advice. And now we're on to printing the iron-on vinyl for our cover. I just designed this particular cover on Canva, and I'm pretty sure I managed to find the same font as the original design for Manacled. So this part also took quite some time because this is the first time I'm using a Cricut, so I think the design I chose was a little bit too detailed, so the little bits of vinyl kept lifting when I didn't want it to, of course, so that's okay, lesson learned. Even though this step took some time, it actually was really relaxing too. I really like doing really like tedious and detailed work. So even though it took some time, it was still a lot of fun and very satisfying once you get to the end. So this is how it all turned out. And now the most nerve-wracking part is actually ironing it onto our book covers. So just make sure that it's all aligned. And I didn't have a Cricut, I think they're called press on, so the iron specifically to use with the iron on vinyl. I just had like this mini iron that I use for my other sewing projects, but it still worked. It just took a bit of time for it to actually stick onto the book cloth. I really love the gold against the blue or navy backdrop, and I'm not 100% happy with it, but I'm glad that I managed to actually finish it and finally have a physical copy of this book. And it's all done. Thank you so much for watching this video, and like I said, I am not a pro. I was just making this book for funsies, and I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in my next video.